Good day, everyone. My name is Samvit Govindani, and I'm here to present a frugal engineering solution to a global healthcare crisis. My research focuses on smart biomaterials. Specifically, I've engineered a novel plant-based hydrogel that transforms the way that we can treat chronic wounds in low-resource settings. By combining fenugreek and phycillium, I've developed a dressing that just doesn't cover the wound; it communicates with it. So, to understand why this is necessary in the first place, we need to look at the biology of the wound itself. There's a fundamental difference between an acute wound, like a paper cut, and a chronic wound, like a diabetic foot ulcer. As you can see on the right in the diagram, chronic wounds are often stuck in a prolonged inflammatory state, and the extracellular matrix degrades, and crucially, it becomes highly prone to infection with impaired angiogenesis, increased MMPs, and impaired ECM synthesis. For a patient in a developed nation, this is managed with advanced care. But for millions in the developing world, this problem often leads to a tragic outcome, that being amputation. As you can see on the right, those are some of the problems that patients face according to the NCBI. And while it requires advanced care, people in these rural countries, like such as in sub-Saharan Africa, simply do not have the access to those. Excuse me. And the scale of the problem is truly staggering. Chronic wounds affect nearly 4% of the global population. And in the US alone, the cost for treatment and management exceeds $3 billion annually. But the real burden lies in the global south. With 400 million diabetic ulcers and diabetics predicted by the end of 2025, we are facing a tsunami of diabetic foot ulcers. And in rural India, and India being where I am right now, access to pathology labs is very limited, and undetected infection and especially chronic wounds isn't just a medical complication, it's a life altering and potentially a death sentence. Now, what are the current tools available to a rural doctor? They face an impossible trade off because, on one side, they have a standard cotton gauze. It's cheap, yes, but it's a passive material. It dries out the wound, causes severe pain during removal, and crucially, it hides the infection until the tissue is already necrotic. On the other side, we have synthetic hydrogels. They're effective because they're hydrogels, and they have specific nanoparticles often integrated into them, such as silver nanoparticles. But they are almost inaccessibly expensive, and they often use harsh, non-biodegradable polymers that may cause cytotoxicity as well. And actually, this quote that I found from a research paper on the top about how hydrogels exhibit immense potential actually is sums up the foundation for why hydrogel research is so important now, and the need for these new kind form of materials for wound healing and accelerated epithelialization. And you can see the problems with traditional wound dressings below. My research question actually was simple, that can we engineer a dressing that has the smart diagnostic capabilities of the synthetic hydrogels but is built entirely from frugal, sustainable, and eco friendly materials? So, this is my research. To solve this, I engineered a biocomposite matrix that integrates four specific ingredients, as you can see on the diagram on the left, and each has a distinct function. At the center, we have the Phycillium husk backbone. This provides the 3D arabinoxylin scaffold, and this arabinoxylin scaffold is integrated with the fenugreek seed mucilage. My hypothesis was that the galactomannans in the fenugreek seed gel would not only reinforce the structure but also provide the necessary antimicrobial activity. Aloe vera was added as a natural plasticizer to prevent the gel from becoming brittle. And finally, the smart part of the hydrogel, Indian black carrot extract, rich in anthocyanins, which can act as our pH sensor. The anthocyanins undergo chromatic changes that can in different pHs, and that would allow infection detection, as I will explain later. Now, the synthesis protocol was designed to be eco-friendly and scalable, but it was strictly controlled for thermal stability. Step 1 was thermal extraction. I utilized a sol gel method with distilled water at 65 degrees Celsius. The specific temperature is critical because it ensures the full hydration of the phycelium chains without degrading the polysaccharide polymer. Step 2 was integration. I blended the fenugreek and aloe vera crosslinkers into the matrix as it cooled to create a stabilized matrix. And finally, the most important step, functionalization. You will notice I only introduced the black carrot extract towards step 3 and at below 45 degrees Celsius. Why? Because anthocyanins are thermally unstable. If I had added them at step 1, they would have denatured and lost their color changing ability. The gels were then cured in the dark to prevent the UV degradation. To validate the hydrogel material that I had created, I subjected to 3 rigorous in vitro assays compared to a pure phycelium control. First, gravimetric analysis to ensure fluid retention, simulating a high exudate wound environment over 4 hours, with exudate being the fluid that comes from the wound. Secondly, colorimetric buffer testing across the pH spectrum of 2 to 14 to map the diagnostic chromatic transitions that would act as our sensor, like I talked about earlier. And I will touch upon further later. And finally, a DCPIP assay to quantify the antioxidant capacity, meaning its ability to scavenge free radicals and reduce oxidative stress in the wound, which would enhance and accelerate wound healing. Now, let's look at the data. The first critical success of the hydrogel was the therapeutic efficacy via fluid management. On this graph, you can see on the left, we have the 3 bars that represent the control, and the right, we have the final enhanced hydrogel. As you can see, within the first hour, the fenugreek enhanced matrix absorbed 177% of its initial weight compared to just 120% for the control. And this is significant because this indicates a supramolecular network capable of handling heavy wound exudate, which is the primary cause of tissue maceration in chronic ulcers and how the wound gets even worse. Next, the diagnostic capability, which I was talking about. This image captures the black carrot anthocyanins in action. On pH2 on the left, the dressing is bright red, simulating a healthy acidic skin mantle. But look at the shift as we move on to pH 8 and then pH 14. The blue-green transition occurs in the alkaline range, which is clinically associated with bacterial colonization. So the key here is that the acidic pH range and the reddish orangish colors are associated with the healing, and the wound is fine. But when the pH becomes to around the alkaline range of 8 to 14, it signifies infection has happened, and this hydrogel can change color, and the chromatic transition can allow visual smart early infection detection. If a patient is wearing has the hydrogel on the wound, if the hydrogel changes color to bluish or greenish, they can tell that the infection is spreading or is starting, and that can lead to a faster clinical response and preventing it from getting worse. And finally, we quantified the bioactivity using a DCPIP assay. Here, a lower value would mean higher antioxidant activity because the free radicals have been neutralized. The enhanced hydrogel, as you can see in the 3 trials that were conducted, that's shown on this graph, showed consistently lower absorbance using the spectrophotometer than the control. And this signifies approximately 33% increase in the radical scavenging efficiency. And this confirms that the dressing does not just sit there, but it actually actively manages the oxidative stress, and effectively it cools down the inflammatory and inflamed state of the wound. Now, so why does this formulation work better than the components individually? It comes down to the synergistic effect, which was a core component of my research and the literature that I did before I created this formulation. Did not just mix the gels because the fenugreek galactomanons interacted with the phycelium backbone to create a denser, more cross-linked network, and the functional diagnostic part is enabled by the anthocyanins, with the aloe vera acting as the bridge to stabilize the matrix. So all the parts can work together. And this diagram is just a very key visualization of the core principle of my material. Okay, so to summarize the findings, diagnostic accuracy was validated with the clear red to green shift. Therapeutic efficacy was proved with nearly double the fluid retention of the control, and a bioactive defense was established with 33% higher radical scavenging activity to manage oxidative stress and wound exudate and provide infection detection. So a three-way approach, a three-in-one solution. Excuse me. However, in the spirit of scientific rigor, I must address the current limitations of this study. First, the fluid retention profile was limited to a 4-hour window. To validate this for chronic wounds, I would need to extend this testing to 28 to 48 hours, possibly on an in vivo model, to ensure the hydrogel doesn't disintegrate. Secondly, while the fenugreek is known to be antimicrobial, I've inferred this activity from a lot of literature. But I still need to perform zone of inhibition testing against S. aureus and P. anningosa to quantify the exact inhibition rates. And finally, I must solve for the shelf life stability of the natural pigments like the anthocyanins in non refrigerated conditions and conditions which may not be dark and would have light. And to address these, my future roadmap is clear. Firstly, is biological validation, moving to in vivo animal models to test biocompatibility. Then, phase two would be developing a UV protective package to preserve the anthocyanins and the functionality of the hydrogel. And finally, phase three is access, because a solution is only good as the people it reaches. And a pilot study in rural India or any other rural area in the world would be to target a production cost of under 1 USD per unit, and a pilot study in the rural healthcare centers would be the ultimate goal. To conclude, I would like to sincerely thank the International Young Researchers Conference for this opportunity, and my parents and science teachers at DPS International for their constant support and encouragement during my research and for providing me the facilities to conduct this research. We are moving away from the high tech equals to high cost paradigm. And this hydrogel, this fenugreek phycelium hydrogel, represents a future where the advanced wound care is not only accessible to the rich, but to everyone who needs to alleviate their suffering. Thank you.